תפתח ואז אני אתחיל את השיעור.
כן, ואני סוגר מיקרופונים לאנשים אחרים.
בסדר, ומישהו עושה גם אני מוסגר עכשיו. אוקיי, תודה.
מאה אחוז.
אוקיי. אז קודם כל, בוקר טוב, ותודה להרוד, לפתיח. And we're switching to English, right? I get some mixed up English and Hebrew, so we're good, but English. So I picked a topic today. I'm pretty sure I've never done this year with you people. If I have, then let me know and we can adapt it to a bit of a different direction. But I want to begin with the opening line of Parshat HaShavua called Zot Chukat Torah. And actually, if you want, as long as you guys can all chat, what I want you to do is write in the chat. It'll be interesting to see what people write. Also, a way to keep you guys awake a little bit. When I say the word Torah and Chukat Torah, like this is the chok of the Torah, just tell me how you understand what the word Torah is referring to. It's just real simple. You can either answer the answer. If you don't know, write I don't know. Or you have no idea or you never thought about it. But just write something. But the word Torah in the opening line, what's that referring to? Okay, I'll just watch. We can watch the after you write your answer. You can look at don't look what other people are writing. First, write what you think, and then you can look what other people are writing. Then, based on your answers, I'll know how many people know the shir or not. Okay, this is good. We're doing good. Okay, this is excellent. Alrighty. Oh, Danny. Okay, I knew you were going to say that, Danny. You have to be quiet today. Okay, let me take a look at the chat real fast. What are we up to? We're up to how many chats? We'll see. Okay, we have a lot. They keep taking another 30 seconds or so, and I'll start reading them off. Okay, so the Torah, I'll start with the whole teaching. We have the word procedure. Some people wrote procedure. The 5 books of Chumash, the laws, okay, the complete 5 books, the laws given to the people, procedural requirements. Okay, basically, if I want to summarize the chat so far, it's actually quite simple. There's some people who said the word Torah refers to what we call the Torah. If you were at Hagba, I don't know if anyone has a minyan or not, but this morning after laning, we did Hagba, and everyone said, Zot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe. When we lift up the 5 books of Moses, as someone wrote, we refer to the 5 books of Moses, or our Torah scroll, as the Torah. And therefore, we're about to study the laws of Paraduma. And this law is a classic. I guess the fancy word in English is quintessential. I think that's the right word for it. This is like the quintessential chok, where chok is a law that makes no sense. And of all the laws that make no sense in Chumash, this makes the most no sense. Not nonsense, but no sense. Hope I didn't say anything, what do you call it, blasphemy-wise? It's okay. In other words, there are many laws in the Torah that make no sense, or have no obvious reason. But this law not only doesn't make sense, it's almost counterintuitive. Why? Because this is a law about making something that makes other people tahor, but everyone involved in the process becomes tameh. It's almost like a paradox. And therefore, the classic way of understanding the opening line is what's coming up in chapter 19. And let's take a look at it real fast. I'll share my screen. And we'll take a look at our English Hebrew Bible. Zot Chukat Torah. What's coming up is the chok of the Torah, of the 5 books of Moses. And what's coming up is a law that makes no sense at all. And this is like the classic chok. And I'll follow Rashi for a minute. How does Rashi understand why are chukim? Why are these laws so important? He has a very logical reason why God gives us laws without any logic. Because he claims it's the famous, Rashi says it several times, but one of the best sources is in Sefer Bereshit in Perek Chavav, in the beginning of Parshat Toldot, when God tells Yitzchak that Avram kept mitzvotai chukotai v'torotai. Rashi explains what each of the words mean. And for the word chukotai, Rashi says, what are chukim? These are gzerot, these are decrees that God gave us, very similar to decrees of a king. And because they have no logical reason, when someone keeps a decree, a law, that has no logical reason for it, that proves that they respect the person giving the decree. If the only reason I'm doing a certain action is only because God commanded it, but not because it gives me any good or there's no logic to it, other than the fact that God commanded it, that shows my faith in God. That's Rashi's approach. Rambam, Maimonides, has a totally different approach. His claim is that all the chukim, if we have time, we'll see it later on, all the chukim are logical. They make a lot of sense. They have no obvious reason, but when you study them carefully, you'll find a reason. And we're almost obligated, according to the Rambam, to try our best to understand what's the underlying logic behind laws that at first glance make no sense at all. And that'll be his approach to chukim. We're going to follow in today's shir the Rambam's approach. That was way of introduction. Now what I want to do is somebody read Chumash and understand what's going on. And I want to go now and entertain the other possibility of the word Torah meaning a procedure. And to do that, I want to share with you what am I going to share with you? I'm going to share with you something about baking or cooking. Let's say you're bored and you want to make let's say chocolate chip cookies. So I go to a recipe box, I want a recipe for chocolate chip cookies. It says chocolate chip cookies. It tells me I need 4 eggs, flour, vanilla, whatever I need, chocolate chips, etc. So I have a list of ingredients, and then it tells me the procedure. What do? I take the flour, I take the water, I take eggs, I mix them up together, I put some seasoning in, I make a batter, whatever it is, then I put the chocolate chips in, and then I turn them into little balls, and I put them in the oven at whatever temperature, and they come out of the oven. I tell everyone you can't take them because they're too hot to eat, and when they cool down, I put them in a cookie jar, where I can tell people you can't touch the cookie jar until it's time to serve them. Now, there's a procedure for making chocolate chip cookies. Now, I'm going to change this now and give you another example. Let's say I'm a Kohen working in the Beit HaMikdash, and I need to offer a Korban Mincha. I need to offer a flour offering. What do? Well, I'll open up Sefer Vayikra, and I go to chapter 6 in Sefer Vayikra, and I'll look at, starting from Pasuk, from Pasuk Vav, I think. Pasuk Zayin. Everyone have Pasuk Zayin in Vayikra? It says, Zot Torah Mincha. What's coming up? This is the Torah, or the procedure, not the law of the Mincha, because we already had the law of the Mincha in chapter 2. It's, what you bring for a Mincha, we had that in chapter 2. But how to offer a Mincha, that's how the procedure of offering it, that's going to be in Parshat Tzav. And how's it offered? It's offered by a Kohen in front of God. And what does this Kohen need to do? The Kohen has to take a handful from the flour and from the oil that's mixed with the flour, right? And some of the levona, I guess they call it frankincense, some of the spices that's on top of it, all in a handful. And you remove that with your hand from the mincha, and you put it on the mizbeach for a reach nichoach. And then the leftovers, you're allowed to eat. And then we're told some instructions. You can't. That's how you offer it. And then there's some laws. You can't bake it with chametz and things like that. Therefore, I see in Parshat Tzav that the word Torah refers to a procedure. And let's say I want to bring a korban chatat. So I say here in Pasuk Yitzhak, here's where to bring a chatat and how to bring a chatat. And what's it? If I look in Perek Zayin, it continues with Zot Torah Hasham, and then there's later on Zot Torah Tzevach Hashlamim. And if I'm really into Parshat Tzav, just look at the very end with the summary of these 2 chapters. Zot Torah Lola Lamitcha Lachatat Lasham. What we just had were the procedures for how to offer a mincha, chatat, and hasham, etc. In other words, Parshat Vayikra gave me the laws of what animals you're allowed to bring, or what offerings you bring, what you're allowed to bring. How to bring them is Parshat Tzav. And this word Torah is used over and over again in Sefer Vayikra. For example, let's say you're a Kohen and it's time to take him at Tzorah, someone who has leprosy, and it's time to take him out of quarantine. And his 14 days are over, his quarantine's over, and it's time to take him out. So there's a procedure. Zot Torat Amatzorah B'Yom Torato. And you bring him to the Kohen, and you go outside the camp, and you take a look at it, and you bring some birds. There's a whole procedure of what to do to purify a Mitzorah. Later on, we have this all through chapters 15. Look at the end of chapter 15. All the Tuman Torah at the very end. We have Zot Torah Tazav Asher. There's a Torah for Azav, and a Torah for If we go to chapter, no, that's in chapter, where's Torah Yoledet? Back in chapter 13. I'm sorry, Jack in chapter 12. There's a procedure after a woman gives birth to a child. And what's that called? Zot Torah Yoledet, l'zachar v'nekeva. So what I'm trying to show you is all through Sefer Vayikra, and we'll see the same thing in Sefer Bamidbar, the word Torah refers to a procedure in the Beit HaMikdash, a procedure relating to korbanot, how to offer a sacrifice. And it's not only Vayikra, it's also in Sefer Bamidbar, where we're up to now. In Sefer Bamidbar, if I go back to the end of chapter 5, with the laws of Sotah, there's a whole procedure the Kohen does in the Beit HaMikdash, and therefore Zot Torah Taknoot, in the case of Sotah, and there's a whole procedure of bringing a special chatat and having her. There's a whole thing that the Kohen does, so the woman can prove her innocence. And then we're told Vasala HaKohen et Kol HaTorah Hazot. So I'm trying to show you both in Vayikra and also Sefer Bamidbar, the word Torah is almost exclusively used to describe a procedural set of laws, usually related to things going on in the Beit HaMikdash. So that's super clear. In Breshit, we only have the word once, that Avram kept God's Torah, but we don't know what that meant. And all the commentators talk about what Torah did Avram keep, but that's very unclear, that line there. And then in Sefer Shemot, Moshe goes up to get the mitzvah and Torah, but that's a little complicated for now. And the word will take on a different meaning in Sefer Devarim. Hopefully we'll have a chance to get to that. But what's important for me for today's share is in the book of Vayikra and the book of Bamidbar, the word Torah is a procedure. In light of that, what we're going to do, we're going to go and study now for a little bit, and we're going to read line by line and see what the procedure is. So just help me out a little bit because I'm having a little sore throat. Danny, I'm going to unmute you, okay, Danny? And you get to read for us.
Okay.
Start with Pasuk, I'm sorry, wrong chapter. Chapter 19. Read from Pasuk Bet.
From Pasuk what? Bet?
Pasuk Bet.
Zot chukat Torah asher tziva Hashem lemor daber al bnei Yisrael v'ikchu elecha para aduma tamima asher ein ba mum asher lo ala ala ha'ol.
Oh, okay. Now, is that describing a procedure or a law? What would you say? If this is a procedure, what would be step one in this procedure? What do we need to do?
Get the ingredients.
Take the cow.
Now, we're bringing the ingredients, but who has to bring the ingredients? Is God talking to Aaron or talking to the people?
That's the children of Israel.
Yeah. What's really interesting here, I don't know if you paid attention, God is talking who? To Moshe and to Aaron, saying, here's the law coming up, or this is we'll see what that means in a minute, which God is commanding. The first thing you need to do is you need to speak to the people. Got it? God isn't telling Bnei Yisrael, you need to bring a paraduma. God tells Moshe and Aaron, you need to tell the people, bring me a paraduma. The paraduma comes from the people. The Kohen doesn't take one. The Kohen commands the people to bring one. That Bnei Yisrael have to bring, this is a korban tzibor, in the sense. The Bnei Yisrael have to bring a paraduma, what it means, what the word aduma means, we'll talk about later on. But it has no blemish, and for the fun of it, it never worked a day in its life. It never had a yoke on it. It means it knew, it's like a perfect cow with no blemishes. It never worked, in sort of pristine condition. I guess they call it mint condition, if it was a coin. So that's step number one in the procedure. Now continue, Pasuk Gimel.
ונתתם אותה אל אלעזר הכהן, והוציא אותה אל מחוץ למחנה, ושחט אותה לפניו.
Again, is this part of a procedure?
Yeah.
Quite clear it's part of a procedure, it's for sure. And what's important here is, who are we talking to? Who's nitatem ota? That's the Jewish people, isn't it? The same people, this is, Bnei Yisrael have to bring to Aaron, and who do you give it to? You give it to Elazar. Now, what happens if Elazar is no longer alive? What happens 50, 100 years later? Who do you give it to? Why do we say
His descendants.
But which one? But who is it not being given to? Which Kohen cannot do this?
Aaron.
Exactly. Now, anyone know why it can't be given to a Kohen Gadol? This is very rare that this is a law that cannot be done by the Kohen Gadol. Now, does it have to be done by his assistant or by his son or any other Kohen, anyone but the Kohen Gadol? That's a good question. But give me a logical reason why the Kohen Gadol cannot do this service.
It makes them impure.
And is there any other example of a Kohen Gadol, unlike other people, cannot become impure?
Parents.
Exactly. That's exactly Parshat Emor. What are we told? Of all the Kohanim, it's Asur Nefesh Le'tabab Mamav. Kohen Gadol Me'achav, he can't even mitame himself to his parents. So it makes sense why, when it comes to Tumah, the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to do this. It's done outside the camp. Now, I'm not sure whether it has to be Elazar himself or his son, but definitely it can't be the Kohen Gadol for reasons of Tumah. But again, this is step 2 in the procedure. Step 1 is the people of Israel have to buy a paraduma, a perfect one, and bring it to the mikdash, to the Kohen. And who brings it outside the camp? Does the Kohen bring it outside the camp or the people?
People.
The people, right? And then and does the Kohen shecht it or not?
No.
People don't realize that. The Kohen does not shecht it, it's shechted in front of him. Who shechts it, we don't know. But it's shechted by the people in front of Aaron himself. But Aaron has to bring it out. You give it to Aaron, to the Kohen. We'll call him Elazar Kohen. And he shechts it in front of him, but still part of the procedure. Okay, Pasuk Dalet, continue.
ולקח אלעזר הכהן מדמה באצבעו, והיזה אל נוכח פני אוהל מועד מדמה 7 פעמים.
We finally have something Elazar himself does. After it's shechted, he takes the blood, the Kohen, and he sprinkles the blood 7 times. Now, if you know the laws of Kodashim, in a regular sacrifice, it's who can do shchita? Is only the Kohen do shchita, or can anyone do shchita?
Anybody.
Anyone.
If anyone who learns Zvachim, that's one of the first topics here. The shchita is one of the 4 avodot, but it's permitted by Azar. I don't need a Kohen to do shchita, but everything after shchita, kabbalat adam, holachat adam, and zrikat adam, it was receiving the blood, walking with it, and sprinkling it can only be done by the Kohen. Here also, the shchita is not done by the Kohen, but the sprinkling of the blood is done by the Kohen. It's not on the mizbeach, but it's facing the Ohel Moed from outside the camp. Now, would you consider this part of the procedure? I would think so, right? So you notice that every single line here is something procedural, or we're describing a Torah. Continue, Pasuk A.
ושרף את הפרה לעיניו, את הוריו ואת בשריו ואת הדמה על פרשה ישרוף.
Now, is the Kohen burning it, or someone else burning it?
Someone else.
Someone else, because it's done laying out. You found out there's a lot of things being done in front of him, and the parah that he just shechted is burnt in front of him. Now, would you call that a procedure? That's part. Now,
Yes.
everyone take a break for a minute, because I know you've read this before. Ask yourself, I want to go back to my analogy of a recipe card. There's a procedure here. I have my ingredients. Got it? Now, when this procedure is over, what's going to be equivalent to chocolate chip cookies? Meaning, when the procedure is over, what am I going to have? I want you to write the answer in the chat. You understand what I want you to do?
Ashes.
When this procedure is over, write in the chat what you think you end up with. It's an easy question. I want to make sure you're paying attention. We'll take a look at the chat. I'll stop the share for a minute, and we'll look at the chat. So just write in the chat what you're going to get. Okay? Okay. I think we have a nursery rhyme coming up. Very good. Okay, take one more. And I was just asking do this so I can do my little joke I like to do. Because you got the right answers. And what am I going to say? Ashes, asses. They all fall down. That's just for teaching 18-year-olds, keeping them awake. Now, in other words, I need to get to the ashes, and that's my final, that's going to be the end of the process. What do I need the ashes for? We'll see later on. Now, you'll see in a minute why I asked you that question. But so far, every stage it's been a procedure to make the ashes. And what's the word for ashes in Hebrew? How do you say ashes in Hebrew? Like an ashtray. An ashtray is a mapera, because the word is efer, I'm sorry. Efer is ashes ala perish. Okay, now Danny, unmute yourself. Okay, no, you're okay. So now we're going to continue with Pasuk Vav.
ולקח הכהן עץ ארז ואזוב ושני תולעת והשליך לתוך שרפת הפרה.
So there's some more ingredients the Kohen has to throw into the fire, a little hyssop branch and whatever these things are, and he throws it into the fire. Is that part of the procedure? Compared to, that's like putting the vanilla and the baking soda and stuff like that into the mixture. Okay. Pasuk Zayin.
וכיבס בגדיו הכהן ורחץ בשרו במים ואחר יבוא המחנה וטמא הכהן עד הערב.
I'm going to divide this verse into two parts. Let's take the first one, the first half. V'chibes b'gadav hakohen, v'rachat b'sar b'mayim. Would you call that procedure? We'll take a vote now. Okay, I'm going to turn off my thing. I'm going to read it again. The Kohen has to wash his clothes, and this says the Kohen wash clothes, and he washes himself. He himself has to wash himself. I'm going to ask you: is this a procedure?
Sort of.
Yes.
No.
No.
Side procedure.
Like the cook washing a dirty apron.
No, it's not a procedure.
Did we lose Menachem?
Mute.
Menachem, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Menachem.
Okay, I lost my connection for a second. That happens a lot here with our internet. So, okay, so I asked you in the chat, right in the chat, what we just read, that the Kohen has to wash himself and wash his clothes. Would you consider that part of this procedure? Right there, yes or no?
No.
Yes,
No.
if it's part of the procedure, no, if it's not. I just want to get an idea if you're following what I'm getting onto. Just write whatever. Okay. We say yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. Okay. That's like, oh, perfect. Okay. We have a doctor in the house. Okay. Not directly. Okay. We're in between. Okay. We get like half no's and half yeses. Okay. That's enough. That's enough to play with. Okay. So let's go back now to share my screen again and go back to numbers. Okay. What I want to say is as follows. This phrase, washing your clothes, sounds like something like a procedure because it sounds like everything else. But what would happen if the Kohen did not wash his clothes? Would the ashes still be ashes?
Yes.
Yeah. In other
Yes.
words, I'll give you an example. You, by example, from a surgeon, I want to go back to my chocolate chip cookies. If I make chocolate chip cookies in my kitchen, there's a law that I have to wash the dishes. And if I don't wash the dishes and clean up after I bake, it's a chiyuv karet. You know what that means? You're kicked out of the kitchen, at least for a week. Possibly in no breakfast, where you got my analogy. But the chocolate chip cookies are still chocolate chip cookies, whether I wash the dishes or not. Now, this is a type of a procedure possibly, but it's not a procedure towards making the ashes. What is it? The Kohen has to wash his clothes, and only after he washes his clothes and himself can he go into the camp. And the Kohen is tamei until the evening. Now, that clearly is not the procedure. What is this?
It's a law.
It's a law. And the word for a law like this in Hebrew is called a chok. What's the law? If you're involved in the process of making this, if you're the Kohen who sprinkles the blood and adds in and oversees this whole procedure and throws in the hyssop and all that, right? The Kohen who is doing most of this avodah of preparing the parah, the Kohen preparing the ashes, he becomes tamei after he throws in the 8 erez of Ezov. Because that's the last thing that gets burnt. Okay? So that's a chok, that's a sort of a consequence of this procedure. Okay, read the next line now. Danny?
והשורף אותו יכבס בגדיו במים ורחץ בשרו במים וטמא על הארץ.
You read that already, didn't you?
I'll read it again.
Wait, didn't you read that or not? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just joking.
Seems like hey.
Yeah. It sounds just like Pasuk Zayin, doesn't it? If you're not paying attention, you would think it's the same line, isn't it? Ask any Balkore. We just said v'chibes b'gadav hakohen brachat b'sar b'mayim, and then v'tamei hakohen al ha'arev. Here we're saying hasorefot yichibes b'gadav brachat b'sar v'tamei ha'arev. But this is no longer the kohen. Who's this? This is the person who burnt it. So there's the kohen who is doing the ritual avodah, and then there's the other person who burnt it in front of the kohen. So now two people have the same consequence. Both the kohen performing the service, as well as the non-kohen, the non-primary person. Does he have to be a kohen or not? That's the rabbis talk about. But we'll call him now the saref, the person who burns it. He also becomes tamei. Now, if this person who burnt it doesn't wash his clothes and doesn't come back to the camp and doesn't do the mikvah stuff, the ashes are still kosher ashes. So it's not an integral part of the procedure, but it's a law. It's a consequence of that procedure. So it's another chok that comes with the procedure. Okay, one more step now. Pasuk tet.
ואסף איש טהור את אפר הפרה והניח מחוץ למחנה במקום טהור.
Stop here for a minute. Stop. I'm going to stop you in the middle. I know not in the middle of a pasuk. I shouldn't, but I'm doing it anyhow. Okay? But we just read the Resha. Procedure or law?
Procedure.
This is procedure, right? In fact, this is the last step in the procedure, isn't it? Because now I have ashes in an urn. I have ashes collected outside the camp. So Va'asaf Ishtor, another person who's clean, a third person, it can't be any of the first two because they're tamei already. He has to collect the effer of the parah and leave it outside the camp. Got that? And now comes the tricky part. Now finish it. Vayta.
והייתה לעדת בני ישראל למשמרת למי נידה חטאת היא.
Okay. What's Vayta referring to? In simple English, simple Hebrew, Vayta is referring to what?
The ashes.
Exactly.
Ashes?
The ashes that we just collected. The ashes that are collected now outside the camp. Who needs these ashes? These ashes are necessary for who? For Bnei Israel, for safekeeping. And that's why this commandment was given to Bnei Israel. Bnei Israel are involved in the process. They have to bring it and they have to oversee everything. But I need these ashes for the sake of the community. For safekeeping. Why do I need them for safekeeping? Because I need them to do what? To make meinidah. Now, that doesn't mean nida water. You know what it means? Look in Ibn Ezra. Nidah means sprinkling water. In Hebrew, linadot means to sprinkle. Now, a lot of people think the word nidah here has to do with becoming tamei, which might be just a sort of might not be more than a coincidence. But if you look in the Parshanim, most Parshanim hold the word nidah means sprinkling water. Because what are we going to do with these ashes? We're going to find out later on. We're going to take these ashes, mix them in water, make a solution. And with that solution, we're going to sprinkle on the person who's tamei. But that'll be already a different process. But I need these ashes in order to make, we'll call it meinidah, which means sprinkling water. I'll need them for that purpose, and Am Yisrael needs them. And this whole process, it has a din of a korban. It's the korban chatat. What does it mean to korban chatat? We'll see soon. But this is the category, not the meinidah is not a korban chatat. This whole korban we did, this whole procedure, etc. This whole offering is a type of a chatat. Now, one more line, pasuk yud.
וחיפש האוסף את עבר הפרה את בגדיו וטמא על הערב. You keep moving the thing on me. הייתה לבני ישראל.
I did that on purpose. Stop here. Okay. What's that? A procedure or law? The Osef has to wash his clothes.
No,
Coming
not
to the-
procedure.
It's not the procedure for making the ashes anymore. It's another law that comes with the procedure. Because what to me, there's 3 people now just became tamei. the koves, what do you call it? I'm sorry, the osef became tamei, the soref became tamei, and the kohen became tamei. Got it? 3 people were involved in the process of making these ashes, and what's common to all 3 of them, or basically everyone involved in the process of making these ashes becomes tamei, which I think now is exactly what that's the chok of the Torah. You follow? If the Torah is referring to the procedure of making the ashes, then this procedure has a chok. What's the chok? Which is a classic paradox. Everyone involved in the process of making these ashes becomes tamei. Got it? But that's a chok of the Torah. Not the Torah, but rather this specific Torah, this procedure of making ashes has a chok. What's the chok? Everyone involved in the procedure is tamei. Now, everyone understand why it's a paradox, because it doesn't make sense. But soon we're going to give a reason. But let's just finish the pasuk up now. Finish up pasuk yud. Vaita.
Vaita livnei Yisrael v'lager hagar b'tocham l'chukat olam.
Okay. What's Vaita referring to?
The procedure.
That's good. It's Vaita. Here it meant the ashes, right? Is this Vaita the ashes or the procedure? I want to show you. It's again referring to the ashes. It was Am Yisrael needs these ashes. First, we need them for Mei Nida, but now we're explaining why do we need this Mei Nida and ashes for what? For everyone in the community, for Chukat Olam. What's the Chok Olam? We don't know yet. But you want to take a guess? What's the next line? Hanogeh b'met b'chol nefesh adam b'tamei shivat yamim. Is that a procedure or that's a law?
Law?
That's a law. I'll give you an example. Let me give you an example of what a chok is. A chok is like this. I have a little box in my hand. See this? Do a little magic trick. Let me turn off the thing so you can see better. Stop the share. Okay, I have a little box in my hand called whatever this object is. I throw it up, and it comes. You can't see the whole thing, but see what happens? I throw it up, it comes down. Why does that happen? How come when I throw this up, it comes down?
Law of
You know why?
gravity.
Gravity.
Exactly. Yeah. You know what that's called in Hebrew? In fact, in Yirmiyahu talks about it. It's called chukot shemayim va'aretz. Way before Newton. All the laws of nature, sunrise, sunset, the galaxies, the constellations, the sky at night and everything, gravity, any law of nature, Chumash calls that chukot shemayim va'aretz. A chok is something that's set that doesn't change. Like in Hebrew, if I'm going to engrave letters, it's called lechok, like chok tachot, if you know chok Shabbat. Anything like in English is called a statute. Anything that's set that doesn't change is a chok. And therefore, the law of tumat met, if you touch a dead body, you become tamei. That's a law. That's given. I'm going to return that law in a minute. I want to go back now for a minute to what we said before, and try to explain why it says chatati. What's this idea of chatati? What it means chatati, and what does this have to do with the fact that all these people are becoming tamei? Remember, everyone knows the paradox. How could it be that these ashes, which are going to make other people tahor, anyone involved in making the ashes become tamei? Any other korban, right? Kohanim bring lots of korbans, don't they? They sprinkle the blood. You don't become a tamei when you offer a korban, or when you put the animal, and when you bring a korban olam, you burn the meat on the mizbeach, you don't become tamei. But think a little bit. Do you know of any other korban where the animal is burnt?
The Ola.
Ola.
Okay. How about the Ola? That's classic. But does the person become tamei or not?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
Is there a chatat that is ever burnt? What do you do with the meat of a chatat? The animal of a chatat, what's usually done with a chatat?
It's eaten, part of it.
Then who eats it?
Kohanim.
The Kohen. Is there ever a chatat that's not eaten and burnt instead?
Yom Kippur.
Very good. Let's take a look in Sefer Vayikra. Open up Perek Zayin. At the end of the Yom Kippur service, remember there's two in the beginning. There's a chatat of Aaron and there's a chatat of the Am. The chatat of Aaron is the par, and the chatat of the Am is the seir. And what do they both share? We take their blood, and what do we do with their blood? Okay. ולקח מדם הפר, ויזה בעצמו על פני הכפור קדמה, and they shochet in the sirah chatat, and he takes that blood and also sprinkles the blood, which we take the blood of the par and the sir of chatat, of Yom Kippur, and sprinkle it. That's the kapara. And then when the whole thing's over, we're told as follows. Pasach Chavzayin. Vet para chatat, vet sirah chatat, these two animals, usually the animal goes on the altar or eaten, right? These animals are not eaten because why? Asher huvad damam lechaper b'kodesh. They're called Sirim Hanisrafim. In fact, that's their name in Israel Makaman, if you say that in the morning. Right? These two korbanot chatat, because the blood is brought inside, what happens? Right? You can't bring these animals on the mizbeach, and you don't eat them either. Therefore, you take them outside the camp. Yotzi michutz lamachaneh. You burn them outside the camp. Remember saying El Yom HaKaman ever? That's called Sirim Hanisrafim. Or in Parim Hanisrafim. Whenever the blood is sprinkled inside, you don't eat the meat. Instead, it's burnt outside the camp. But what are we told? What do we see here? That the person burning a korban out, if there's a chatat that needs to be burnt outside the camp, that makes the person burning it tameh. Did you follow what I just told you? I'll explain it again. I'm trying to explain why we're told that this is a chatat. This cow that we just burnt is a burnt cow outside the camp, but it's a korban chatat. And therefore, whenever I bring a korban, remember, what's similar to a korban? It's not the classic korban because we know that all korbanot can only be brought in the Beit HaMikdash. I'll give you an example. If I go back, as long as I'm writing Sefer Vayikra, it's the next chapter. In chapter 17 in Vayikra, what are we told? If you want to eat an animal, it has to be a korban, right? And then we're told, okay, what's it say here? Let's short it. Make it the korban one. Balem tumar. Ish mebeit Yisrael min hager asher yigor b'tochem asher yileh olah zavach. Ve'apetach omeid lo hevieno. Lasot utan l'Hashem v'nichat nefeshim yamav. If you bring a korban outside the Mikdash, the Mishkan, you're in big trouble. If you ever read Sefer Yeshua, remember in chapter 22 in Sefer Yeshua, when Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain go back to their side of the Jordan, they erect a giant mizbeach as a sign that they're part of that we're the same nation, and they're misunderstood, and the people think they're making this mizbeach to bring korbanot, and there's a big argument going on, and they have to prove their intentions. But what was the problem? You can't bring korbanot anywhere outside the Mishkan in Shiloh at that time. It's called Shchutei Chutz, and Chumash wants to make sure that any sacrifice is only done in one central place. It's one of the biggest things in Sefer Dvarim, Hashem. You can only bring korbanot in one place. Remember? And you can't serve God in many places. It's called Isur Bamot. But Chumash is very strict that korbanot can only take place in the Mikdash. The second I allow something to be offered outside the Mikdash, I have a problem. And what we're going to see, whenever there's anything sacrificial, any ritual done that relates to sacrifice, that's done outside the temple, even though it's for the purposes of the temple, when it takes place outside the temple, it has this precautionary measure and it causes tumah. And therefore, if you go back to Perek Tetzayin, looking again, what do we have here? The parachatat and the sirachatat have to be burnt outside the camp, but the person who burns the parachatat and the sirachatat he becomes tameh. The same, and only afterwards he can come to the camp. That's almost the same law we had by the paraduma. Not only that, if you go back to Pasach Havav, there's another animal that's brought outside the camp. The Sir Lazazel, remember? What does he have to do? He also brought a korban outside the camp. He also becomes tameh. So what's the rule of thumb? There's a rule of thumb which is actually logical. anytime there's any ritual that relates to the mikdash, but performed outside the mikdash, then the person doing that ritual becomes tameh. It's almost like a safeguard, so we make sure to know, no, we're allowing it, but it's sort of b'di'evet. But offering a korban outside the mikdash causes tumah. And therefore, for a very technical reason, but that's the chok of this Torah, that everyone involved in the process, which later is going to be used to make other people tahor, becomes tameh. So that was part number one of the show I wanted to get across. I'm trying to explain, going back here, why is the Torah saying chatati? Because it's this phrase chatati is going to explain what's the reason why these people become tameh, and where does Chumash write it? Right is the introduction of why the osef is going to become tameh, and why the sorek became tameh, and why the kohen became tameh, because it's a chatat. So that was part one of the logic. Let me summarize my main point. The opening line, Chukat Torah, is saying there's a Torah of making the ashes. That's the procedure. This process has a din, even though it's done outside the temple. It's michutz lamachaneh. It has a din of a chatat, and therefore anyone involved in this process, because it's being done outside the temple, michutz lamachaneh, becomes tameh, and that's the chok of this Torah. That anyone involved in the process becomes tameh, not just the kohen, but also the osef and also the soref. Now that I've finished that topic, we're going to go now and see what I need this for. So let's pick up again from Pasuk Yud. V'haita, I try to explain, these ashes, who are they for? They're for the needs of Bnei Israel and every stranger in their midst, and every convert as well, for a chukat olam. What's the chok olam? Just like there's laws of gravity, there's laws of nature, there's laws of tumah. If you touch a dead body, you're tummy for 7 days. Got the logic? Why is that? God decided. But that's the way it is. That's set. It doesn't change. Anytime if you touch a dead body, you're tummy for 7 days. Nothing you can do about it. Now, where's Dani? Okay, pick up Dani from Pasuk Yud Bet, and we'll take a vote here. We have to see, is Pasuk Yud Bet a procedure or a law? Because Pasuk Yud Aleph for sure is a chok. That's a law. Okay, Pasuk Yud Bet.
יתחטא בו ביום השלישי וביום השביעי יתר, ואם לא יתחטא ביום השלישי וביום השביעי לא יתר.
Yitchata means sprinkled upon. Okay? This person who is nogeh b'met, the person who touched a dead body, who's now tamei for 7 days, he has to be sprinkled upon, right, with these ashes, I guess. Doesn't say exactly how to do it yet, on day 3 and day 7. But if he's not sprinkled upon on day 3 and day 7, he's not tahor. Now, let's take a vote now. Is this a law or a procedure? Yeah, we can use it. Well, I'll play with the chat again. I'm trying one of my teaching tools with Zoom, see if it works. Okay. Write in the chat if that pasuk what we just read. I'll read the pasuk again before you vote. Okay. Hu yitchata bo b'yom hashlishi u'b'yom hashvi'i yitar, v'im lo yitchata lo yitar. Is this verse, is this a law, is this a chok, or is this a Torah? Is this a procedure? And just go to the chat and write one or the other. Just for the fun of it. Okay. It's one of my trick questions, okay? Just think on your own. Don't read what other people were saying. Okay, we'll get a couple more answers. A law or procedure. It's like we got so far. One law, one person says both. Another law. First part procedure, second part is a law. Okay. Law. Okay, I'll take for one more. Okay, that sounds pretty good. Okay, most people are voting law or both. Okay, so let me explain what I want to get to. Of course, you guys are pretty much right. I agree with you that it's a law. In what sense? What if I look back at Pasuk Yud Zayin again? Pasuk Yud Aleph. If I only had Pasuk Yud Aleph, what would I think? If you touch a dead body, you're tamei for 7 days. What happens after 7 days? What happens? You're not tamei anymore. What's this tell you? This Pasuk Yud Bet qualifies Pasuk Yud Aleph and says you're tamei for at least 7 days. That's minimum tumah, but you remain tamei until you've done this procedure. Got it? Now, Pasuk Yud Bet implies the need for a procedure, but it's not. this doesn't describe how you do this procedure. It implies there's a need for a procedure. I don't know what that procedure is yet. But Pasuk Yud Bet is a chok. What's a chok? Just like Pasuk Yud Aleph is a chok. Yud Aleph Yud Bet is a chok, that if you touch your dead body, you're tamei for minimum 7 days. And the only way to get rid of your tumah is to be sprinkled upon on day 3 and day 7. That's a chok. Now, this chok implies there's a need for a procedure. I don't know what the procedure is yet. I haven't been told yet. We'll read on. We're going to find it very soon. Is that clear? So again, Yud Aleph, Yud Bet are chukim. Are chukim that imply the need for a procedure. In fact, that's what we said here. Vaita, these ashes are needed for that procedure because of this chukat olam. The chukat olam is pasuk Yud Aleph and Yud Bet. Chukat olam means it's a chok forever, for all generations, not just for this generation in the desert. It's a chok olam, it's for all generations. Because someone might think that some chukim are only for the desert. No, this is a chok olam, not just in the desert. Okay, now, pasuk Yud Gimel.
I'm still up.
Okay, pasuk Yud Gimel. Okay, take away, Danny.
כל הנוגע ומת בנפש האדם אשר ימות ולא יתחטא, את משכן השם טימא ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מישראל. כי מי נידה לא זרק עליו, טמא יהיה עוד טמאתו בו.
Okay. What's this? Chok or procedure? Or something else?
Chok.
Chok.
It's a law. And what's the law now? If you're tamei and you enter, if you're tested positive, if I use the corona analogy, and you go to a shul, you go to the great synagogue, right? You're going to infect other people. In other words, it's forbidden to you, if you're tamei met, it's forbidden to you to go to the Mishkan. And if you do that, you're chayiv karet. Why? Because what didn't you do? The procedure of sprinkling the mei nidah wasn't performed on you, and therefore you're still tamei. The fact that 7 days passed is not enough. It can be a week, it can be a year later. If you don't have mei nidah sprinkled upon you, you remain in the status of tamei met forever. And if you go to the mikdash, you're tamei. This halacha has very massive ramifications on people today, because if a tumat met is forbidden to go onto Har Bayit, then until we have paraduma, no one can go onto Har Bayit. The question is it tamei met not permitted on Har Bayit? The halacha is you're allowed to. You can't go into the Azara, but you're allowed onto Har Bayit. But tumat met you can't get rid of. Therefore, in Har Bayit you can't go into the Azara area. Where's the Azara area? If anyone's done a study of the permission to go into Har Bayit or not, but you can go to the Temple Mount, and where you can go on the Temple Mount, and what type of mikveh you need, and things like that, has to study this topic. Now, but this is another law which relates, but it's sort of it's a tangential law, and explains the reason. So what if you're tamei? So what if you're tamei? If you're tamei, what's the big nafkamina? You can't go to the Beit HaMikdash, and if you do, you're you're chayiv karet. Okay. Now we're going to ruin the whole shir with pasuk Yudalad. Okay, pasuk Yudalad. Zot Torah.
זאת התורה אדם כי ימות באוהל, כל הבא אל האוהל וכל אשר באוהל יטמא 7 ימים.
Okay. Pasuk Yudalad, is that a law or a procedure?
Law.
What is it? Is it a Torah or a chok? Pasuk Yudalad.
Well, it's the law.
It's a chok, isn't it? How come that ruins my shir?
Torah.
Because the Torah says this is a Torah, right? And now I just ruined the whole shir, didn't I? Because according to my shir, a Torah is a procedure. A chok is a law, a set law that doesn't change. What law is here? Should a person die in a tent? That's not a procedure. That just happens. Anyone in the tent becomes tamei. That's the chok. Just like I could touch a dead body and become tamei. I'm not going to be tamei for 7 days. Or I can be in the same room with a dead body and be tamei for 7 days. So keep the question in mind, but no doubt pasuk Yudalad is a chok. Why it's called a Torah, we'll see why in a minute. Okay, one more line, pasuk Tetvav.
וכל כלי פתוח אשר אין צמיד פתיל עליו טמאו.
In other words, if I have a vessel, if it's closed in this room, it says Torah, but if it's open, got it? Then the water inside becomes tamei. Got it? Is that a chok? Is that a procedure or a chok?
Chok.
That's a chok. Okay. And now one more line, Tet Zayin.
וכל אשר ייגע על פני השדה בחלל חרב או במת או בעצם אדם או בקבר, יטמע 7 ימים.
What's this tell us? Not only if you touch a dead body or in the same room with a dead body, but if you're in the open field, remember, it's no longer an ohel, the open field, and you touch a sword that's inside the dead body. So let's say you're working for Chevra Kadisha for whatever it is, for the Rabbanut, unfortunately, and there's a sword inside a dead soldier, and you touch the sword, then that makes you tamei as well, even though you don't touch the dead body, or only the bone of a dead body, right? Or you touch a grave, you're also tamei for 7 days. Got it? So that's clearly another chok, isn't it? What we have here in Pasuk Yadalet Tedvav and Tetzayin are additional chukim that make someone tamei. Now, so if I have to summarize, how does someone contract tumat met? How do you do it? You can either touch a dead body, be in the tent with a dead body, be inside of a vessel, inside a room in a dead body, or touch a bone of a dead body, or a grave, or the sword that killed somebody. Now, how do you get rid of that tumah? We only implied before that what? That you need to be sprinkled upon. We don't know how to do it yet. Now read Pasuk Yud and we'll solve the problem.
ולקחו לטמא מעפר שכיבת החטאת ונתן עליו מים חיים אל כלי.
That's a procedure now, isn't it? Just read one more line. Yudchet, ולקח.
ולקח אזוב וטבל במים איש טהור והיזה על האוהל ועל כל הכלים ועל הנפשות אשר היו שם והנוגע בעצם או בחלל או במת או בקבר.
One more line, ויזה.
ויזה טהור על הטמא ביום השלישי וביום השביעי וחיטאו ביום השביעי וכיבס בגדיו ורחץ במים וטהר בערב.
So this is all a procedure, isn't it? So if someone's tamei, Pasuk Yud Zayin, step 1, I take the afar and make a solution with Mayim Chaim, put it into a kli. That's going to make the main nidah. I take an azov, a branch, a sub branch. I dip it into this main nidah, to the sprinkling water. It has to be done by someone who's tahor, and I sprinkle it either on the tent or on the kelim that were open, or on the people who were in the tent, or on the person who touched the dead body, or who touched an etzem, or the sword, etc. Right? Or the, in other words, I just summarized every single case here, didn't I? I have tumat ohel, got it? Tumat kelim, tumat maga, tumat etzem, and tumat kever. Understand? Now, these 3 psukim, Yud Zayin, Yud Chet, Yud Tet, describe a procedure, don't they? Now, and what I want to claim is Pasuk Yud Daled is introducing Pasuk Yud Zayin. And everything here is in parentheses. Actually, there's an implicit lamed. What's coming up now? Pasuk Yud Daled, what's coming up? This is another procedure now. We had our first procedure was making the ashes. Now there's a new procedure that was implicitly needed based on what we read before, that you need chitui on day 3 and day 7. Now I'm finally finding this is the procedure that I need for all these different cases. What's the procedure? Pasuk Yud Zayin Yud Chet Yud Tet. Zot HaTorah is not introducing Pasuk Yud Daled. There's an implicit lamed here. What's coming up now is the Torah for le adam kim b'bohel, or a kli patuach, or v'chol sheyigah b'nei sadeh. And what is the Torah? V'lechul hatamei ta ta ta. Is that clear now? That solves the problem? What's coming up now, what I'm about to describe now, so when I read this whole unit from Yud Zayin all the way down till Yud Tet, then it all makes sense. This is a procedure for someone who contracted tumat met. And what do? This procedure. I take the water, I sprinkle it on day, I make the solution, this main nidah, I sprinkle on day 3 and day 7. And now it's really interesting. Look at the end of Pasuk Yud Tet. We'll take a little vote here. Okay. This is the last step. You sprinkle the main nidah on day 3, on the tamei person, on day 3 and day 7. Got it? And then v'chibes begadav v'chatz b'mayim v'tayer ba'arav. Who's that referring to? Is that, look at, if you guys are awake, is this last phrase referring to the tamei met? Is this referring to the person who's sprinkled upon or the person sprinkling? Who's the subject? What?
Sprinkled upon, the tamei mate.
It's referring to the tamei met. Therefore, it's part of the procedure, isn't it? This is a procedure to get rid of the tumat met. Beforehand, whenever you wash your clothes and you wash yourself, it's also a procedure, but that's a procedure to get rid of tumah. So making the ashes, that was a consequence. That's Allah comes with it. Here, when I'm talking about the process of getting rid of the tumah for the tamei met, I need sprinkling day 3 and day 7 as well as mikvah. Okay. Now we're told one final chok. Read pasach. We'll finish up.
ואיש אשר יטמא ולא יתחטא ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מתוך הקהל, כי את מקדש השם טימא, מי נידה לא זרק עליו טמא הוא.
That summarizes everything we learned. Why do I need the Meinida? This is going to protect the Jewish people from Tumat Mikdash. Because if you're Tameh and you go to the Mikdash, you'll be Chayiv Karet, got it? In order to get rid of Tumat Met from our people, we need this Meinida. Remember? By Tal Meinida Chatate, we need this the sprinkling water. If it wasn't sprinkled upon him, he remains Tameh. And therefore, this will be a Chukat Olam. Okay? Because of this Chok Olam, is by Talahem, this Meinida, the sprinkling water, or these ashes, I need them for the Chukat Olam of Tumat Met. And then we have some additional laws, which are a little difficult to understand. Also, here the people involved in sprinkling the Meinida. And anyone touching these Meinida also becomes Tameh till the evening. And anyone touching the person who's Tameh, that's called Sheni L'Tuma, he also becomes Tameh till the evening. But it's only one day Tuma, all of them. Now, does he need mikveh or not? So the Parshim say he does, but it's unclear from here. Is he just Tameh to the evening and that's it? Or does he also need Kibbutz Gadim? If you learn Tarot, there's a whole discussion here of like, there's what's called Rishon L'Tuma, Sheni L'Tuma, and what do you need to get rid of it? Does everyone always need mikveh, or is Harav Shemesh, is sun setting just enough? When I read the Psukim, it can go either way. But when you learn Tarot, there's a whole discussion about what's necessary and how I learn from one type of Tuma to another type of Tuma. Now, what I want to do, I hope that's clear now what we did. And so we went through Perek to understand what's going on. It's like a class more in Kachim. Now comes the fun part. That was the boring part. On my JPS Tanakh, there's, I don't know if you ever noticed this before, there's a terrible typo. Look back in Pasuk Yud Zayin. Look what happened in this JPS Hebrew version. Here, you'll see why the English has it right. Read Pasuk Yud Zayin again. Read Yud Zayin. Translate that for me. Okay. What did we do? Remember, this was the first stage of the process of Tahara. What do we do? We take for the Tameh person. What do we take for him? From what?
Heifer.
What should it be here? It shouldn't be afar, because afar with an ayin is not ashes, it's dust, isn't it? That's dust. So it's a really cool mistake they made here. You see that mistake that JPS made? They take from, it should be efer. Look at the English. They should take from the ashes. The English has it right. But afar is dust, efer is ashes. And we know it's efer because what did we say before? Vasaf ish tahor et efer para. And v'chibes et efer para. Notice, the whole shir was, what are we making? It's procedure to make efer. I'm making ashes, I'm not making dust. And somehow, I don't know how this mistake got into the JPS Hebrew, but they put an ayin there instead of an aleph. Look, anyone have a different Tanakh in their house? This has the correct spelling? Check. Anyone have a Mitch? What were you saying, Mitch? No. You have to. I'm muting you, Mitch. You can talk. No. Press your talk button.
The Hertz Chumash also has afar.
The Hertz has the same mistake? Oh my gosh. Anyone have a Koran? Hopefully Koran has it right.
It's not a mistake.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm just checking if you guys are awake. Of course, I was sort of joking, the teacher. It's not a mistake. What is it? That's the original text. It's not a mistake. In all the Chumashim have an ayin. People don't pay attention to it. But I was only joking that the JPS made it. It's not a mistake. That's the text. The text is afar, which seems to be a mistake, doesn't it? What's the proof it seems to be a mistake? Because you all fell for my joke. That's misspelled. But chumash is essentially calling this dust afar instead of efer. Now, from what you remember, where's the first time we have afar in chumash? Not efer. Where's the first time we have afar? Remember, Avram says, "Anochi afar ve'efer." He mixes the two up, doesn't he? Remember before Stone, Avram says, "How can I turn? I'm afar ve'efer." How come Avram says he's afar ve'efer? It's cute. It's unclear why he says that. But where's the first time we have the word afar in chumash?
Adam and Chava.
Very good. What's it say about Adam and Chava?
He was created from the dust.
I'm sorry, right, wrong thing here. We need Sefer Breshit. Look in Perek Bet in Sefer Breshit. How does God make man? Perek Bet, Pasuk Zayin, I think. Let's look up. Okay. Vayitzer, everyone have it? Vayitzer Hashem Elokim et Adam afar min aduma. I'm sorry, not aduma. Is that aduma or adama? Oh, adama. I'm sorry, it was right. Didn't we have the word adama so far? You catching on? What type of para do I take? I call this hound brown cow. It doesn't say a red heifer. It's a brown. It's adama is from aduma comes from adama. Adama is a reddish brown, and man is made afar from the adama, which in our story, it's basically efer from the aduma is now representing afar min adama. Then veipach b'apav dishmat chayim. That's interesting. What do we call the water that we make this solution with? Why is it called mayim chayim? It's not talking about vodka. If you know what they call mayim chayim. Why is the water called mayim chayim? Because this water is representing life. It's the nishmat chayim. And the afar, now, but there's another story. Remember, God makes man, and then he makes woman, remember? And then man doesn't follow God, and he blames his mistake on his wife. Remember that story? Where God blames his mistake, he says, he blames his wife for what went wrong. God gets really angry at him. And what's man's punishment? This is famous. This is Perek Gimel Pasuk Yotet. Ad shuvcha el ha'adama. Why? Ki mimenu lukachta. This is the most important. Ki afar ata ve'afar tashuv. I'm assuming that the story of creation of man in Gan Eden has a lot to do with the message of Chumash about what life is about. If I'm reading Chumash not to find out how God created, but rather what's the meaning of life, one of the most important events in life is death. And death is a time when we contemplate what's the meaning of life. So death can scare people. Death can cause people to bring them to religion or take them away from religion. But death gives meaning to life because when you don't live forever, then the question is, what do I do with the life that God gave me? Assuming that the story of Gan Eden is there to teach you about your relationship with God and about obeying God and keeping his mitzvot, then there must be symbolism in the fact that man is made afar min adama, and the fact that when he dies, which is a result of his behavior, but when he dies, he returns to the afar from the adama. Afar. Now, when it comes to religion, there's a very basic principle. I call it. I'll explain how I teach it to my high school kids, my teenagers. There's certain events in life that happen that you can't do nothing. Right? There's an anniversary, you can't do nothing. You finish college, you can't do nothing. You finish high school, you can't do nothing. There's certain life events that you can't do nothing. And when you can't do nothing, you have to do something. If it's the end of the year, you have to make a t-shirt, you make a sweatshirt, you have some graduation, you have a birthday. You can't do nothing, you do something. What do? Go to some gift store. But you have to do something. And what you're doing is always something symbolic. And therefore, when someone passes on, and you're involved with death, I need to do something that's going to take that, I guess, their death experience or death experience that you've been with, and I have to do something. I have to do something meaningful. And that's what we call ritual or a chok. I need to do an act that's going to give meaning and translate this event I went through and give it meaning for life. And I think, again, I know chukim, I'm going to follow Rambam as opposed to Ramban. The Rambam who says, in fact, do I have the Rambam in I didn't say, but if do I have time to look at it? Yeah, I'll do it while I'm talking. I'll share my screen. We'll go to Safaria. Let me see if I have Safaria here. Let's see if Safaria has this here. Safaria. Here we go. We don't want Masechet Yoma. We want the Rambam. If you want to look up at the Rambam is in Halacha. It's the end of the book of Avodah. Sorry, Halacha. We want the Rambam. Where's the Rambam? No, my mistake. We want Halacha and we want Mishneh Torah. Here we go, Mishneh Torah. Yeah, we're off here. What happened to Mishneh Torah? Mishneh Torah. Safari is always slow. Beggars can't be choosy. But I'm going to do this when I'm not under share. I'm going to stop my share for a minute. I'll explain this. Wait, let me just try one more time. Let me find it while I'm talking. If I find the Mishnah, let me just read this again. Here we go. The Rambam, his best lines are always at the end of halachot. Something's bad with my connection here. Okay, it's not working, but so I'll tell you by heart. No big deal. The Rambam says as follows. The Rambam in the end of Sefer Avodah, in the end of Hilchot Meila, he says as follows. He quotes the pasuk "Ushmartem et chukotai v'et mitzvotai, v'asitem otam." You have to keep my laws and guard them. You have to follow them and lishmor, to guard them. How do you guard laws? Well, classic laws, it makes sense. Mitzvah, you keep them, you guard them by keeping them. But how do you guard chukim? So you guard chukim by trying to your best ability to understand them. Ushmartem et chukotai means treat chukim as though they make sense, and treat them and try your best to understand their deeper meaning. And if you don't understand them, so don't give up. And don't not keep them because of that, but try your best because all of God's laws have deep meaning. And you have to try your best to understand them. So following that Rambam, what I want to suggest is there's a very deep meaning in the laws of Parah Aduma. Taking afar or making efer from a Parah Aduma and calling this afar from the Aduma or afar min Adama, this whole process, and then putting it in Ma'im Chaim. The word Ma'im Chaim rarely comes up. Yitzchak finds Ma'im Chaim in his bear when people when there's a famine in the land and there's no water and you hit water, then it's Ma'im Chaim, it's Ma'im that keeps you alive. But there are very few times in Chumash where Ma'im is called Ma'im Chaim, but it's usually in the reference to remaining alive, in something relating to death. That if I'm taking this water and calling this water Ma'im Chaim, and I'm putting into these ashes from Afar Min Aduma, I'm doing something to remember what's the essence of God creating man. And what's the essence of it? Man, the fact that man has a neshama. There's something godly about man. So that passes on, when you have death, but life is a gift from God. And what I do with that, again, without going to what I learned from Perek Bet and Gimel in Bereshit, but assuming that Chumash is about man's relationship with God and later Am Yisrael's relationship with God and why they're chosen, then when a person encounters a death experience, they're part of the Jewish people, I need to take that experience. I need my 7 days time out to think about it. And I need a procedure has to do with Chaim, Ma'im Chaim, with Efer from Afar Min Adama. I need to remember the themes of creation, why God made man, what's the challenge of man, what's the challenge of life, what's the challenge of keeping God's mitzvot. And I'm going to do a ritual which is going to carry symbolism that relates to, and I'm going to take my experience with death, my encounter with death, and use it to better appreciate life. And hence, because I can't do nothing, I do something, and I do something symbolic. I do a ritual which is symbolic and meaningful. And when I study that ritual, there's something in there that reminds me of some biblical theme, and hence I think that's the reason for why it's Dafka Parah Aduma, why the color. Aduma, not Miloshin red, but Miloshin brown, because Aduma like Adama. And I take this Parah Aduma and now turn it into ashes. Now again, why is it a Dafka Parah? That has to do with the Korban Chatat. Korban Chatat of the Kohen is always a Parah. And then the meaning of each look. I have the biggest tree and the smallest tree, the 8 eras in Ezov. I take the smallest growing thing and the biggest living thing. And that idea of Eitz Eretz Be'ezov, that's day 3. That day 3 is the day that God made life. Remember, vegetation begins on day 3. And on Shabbat, he rests, so we have time to think about life. There's meaning about day 3 and day 7 as well. That has to do with nature. So I'm tying together the themes of Perek Aleph and Perek Bet and Breshit. But to summarize, to conclude the shir, I simply want to try to explain that even though this chok, this law, which is a quintessential paradox of law that makes no sense because someone's tameh, someone making other people Torah becomes tameh, when you look at it deeply, there's a very good technical reason why the person becomes tameh, but there's a very deep reason why I'm taking specifically a para aduma from the Adama, and this para turns into Efer, which later represents Afar, and that Afar is mixed with Maim Chaim, Maim representing life, and how to use death, the death experience, to give meaning to life, and to rejuvenate and reconnect to God through that experience. I think the symbolism of sprinkling on day 3 and day 7, and all the laws of Tumat Met, can help us appreciate that. If I take this to nowadays we have what's called sitting Shiva. So we sit Shiva for 7 days. I think it relates to that idea of 7 days. And you need time out to deal with death. But the most important point of Shiva is getting up from Shiva. Most people would be aside themselves anyhow for 7 days. The Torah isn't telling you cut yourself off from study for 7 days. You need time out, but the most important thing is to get up and resume life. You need time to dwell in sorrow and to think about things. But the worst thing that can happen would be depression, where you give up on everything and don't get back to life. And the need to recover, to make a death experience meaningful and to deal with it for 7 days, but to get up from it and move on, I think that's what's redeeming about the laws of Tumat Bet. Instead of viewing it as like some mystical ritual kind of thing, I think there's a lot of logic to it. And even though we don't have a Beit HaMikdash today, the ideas behind it, the ideas behind using death experience and using it to appreciate life, number one, dealing with it and marking it, but using it as time to think, but also time to move on and use it as a springboard, stepping board to make life more meaningful, I think is a key theme behind what appears to be some ancient ritual, but I think there's something very deep for modern day life as well. Right, so that's I'll take any questions if you have them. Otherwise we can, I think I'm on a bit over time, yeah, but I hope we're okay.
A question on a technical question. At the beginning, you said that Haita referred to the heifer. Heifer and Afar are both masculine, I believe. Is there a good reason why it should be feminine?
It could be Haita's going on this whole on the whole process. I think I guess the Torah would make more sense if the Torah, the word Torah would make more sense, wouldn't it be?
Right.
Yeah, the Torah. That's a good point. So there's this effort that was made through this procedure. So I need this procedure for Chukat Olam. Very good point. So Vaita, I'm mentioning it because now I have the ashes, but I need the ashes that were made through this procedure. So this procedure is for Chukat Olam. Good point. So I think you're right. I'll take that. I'll stand corrected on that. The Vaita would make more sense. It's referring to this procedure which I just did, because I need that I need this procedure, this Torah, in order to make the Meinida. I need its procedure, this Torah, so for the Chukat Olam of Tumat Bet. So that's a very good point. I totally agree. The grammar's right down there. As now you understand Avraham Avinu where he says Anochi Afar ve'efer. He was just saying that so later on we'd understand this connection between Afar and Efer.
Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you.